They're such cool models. This is one of the best sets we've ever had the pleasure of being sent by GW. Thank you very much, guys. Let's take one small minute just to appreciate that many. Even better. It's not always practical to do subs, but I always want the option. Sub-assemblies, that is. Carefully. A little bit of glue. Yeah, buddy. Step one. That is never coming off. Ever. Well done, GW. So cool. Okay, we're starting off very brave. Size 3, we have put some water on it. Loading it up, removing some. The water is going to help what we do next leave more easily. And it's going to be a pretty brave one, and it could go very wrong. That's how we do blood splatter, by the way. Take a shade, we're going to load it up on the end of the brush. And then, it's very hard for me to show this. Maybe I'll show it on paper afterwards, but I've blown it from the brush at the model. Obviously, you're completely not in control of that, but it is random. And that's what we're going for. So I'm going to do a combo of that and then just like blobbing it in. And we're going to practice this where the hooves would be on his demon claws. And then maybe we'll use it elsewhere on the model. You can see from the brush how hard I've blown it. Too much is far better than too little in terms of how hard you blow. Not the paint. You'll have to fiddle with that yourself. But you can practice against some white paper really easy. So let's cross our fingers for the rest and hopefully it goes okay. I'm going to put a little bit of Caribou Crimson in there. We're just going to hope for the best. Goes without saying, do not have anything pretty behind your painting area when you're doing this because it will spray a long way. My desk is covered. Oh dear. Well, that one went wrong. What about that went wrong? Maybe it's because it was a flat surface and the air can get more easily past the legs. Okay, let's rethink this. Maybe I can use my airbrush for these ones. More power. And maybe a smaller brush. Maybe a bigger brush, who knows? I'm going to slightly dilute it. It's going to have more water and the paint mixed. I'm going to be ready to wash it up. Like if it doesn't go right, then it doesn't go right. Okay. Should have tapped it. That looks crazy. You can learn from my mistakes here. I mean, that's basically the YouTube channel as a whole, isn't it? Hopefully, so tap. Those spiders are not helpful. Okay, right, I need to do my blowing from further away and then just accept that maybe it won't work perfectly. Should have done that from underneath. That would have been perfect. Okay, we've learned. Yeah. You can't always get it right with this type of technique. Just is what it is. See if the angle makes a difference. Oh well. Don't know if it's going to be clear that these are meant to be markings rather than splatter, but I mean, it'll set a tone regardless, right? I mean, it looks pretty cool actually. Splatter effects are just cool. I wanted it more like this, where it was thicker. So maybe it not being diluted was part of that. I am using these neat currently, which we don't often do on the channel. But going over white, we want to have something really pretty disgusting and kind of effective. The only thing to avoid is, because I'm going to do multiple layers of this, having it pooling too much. It looks very Derek Hess. Don't know if anyone knows him as an artist. Missed this bit. Well, that one, I might have saved it. That's really cool. What did I do differently? Okay, I've given you a tool. You can experiment. I cannot give you the exact rules or reasons or ways to do it, but obviously if you dilute it more, that'll make a difference. If you're closer or further from it, that'll make a difference. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Horsey looks scary as hell. Just need to lean into that now and color in my bits. Okay, I'll see you in a little bit. Okay, so with the brush that I've just blown, so it's got the ends spread out rather than pointing together, very carefully poking this pattern. You cannot drag, no brush strokes. You don't want any lines here, only dots. And we're using that to deposit a kind of paint in a mottled pattern. Your bristles will want to start pulling together, especially on our brushes. That's what they want to do. It's what they were designed to do. So kind of be aware of that. And you can either fill in and darken your dark sections, or you can use it to buzz out the edge of your patterns. I forgot between his leggies. Anywhere recessed or underneath, the areas that have ended up dark after we sprayed on our spray, they are red. Means you can get away with not having to paint them as well, you know. I don't want to be reaching down there. I'm fine for them to be red and blotchy and dark and hidden within our patterning conveniently. These do really matter, these bits. So take your time with this. It's going to be pretty fast by horse painting standards, especially for a cool result. The whiter your horse was at the beginning, the more this is going to stand out. So there's probably an argument. I was trying to not build up too much of the white because it can get a bit fluffy from the spray. There's probably an argument for being a little bit more brave with how much of that is on. I went from a black base underneath. You could go from a grey base or something. The white would go on more readily then. Looks evil, doesn't he? Don't mind trying to be random. There are bits of this that are definitely not random, so get in there. Probably be on a brush that's about 4 times smaller than this one at this point. Gonna give it a little bit of a dry brush off today. Didn't know the horses were numbered as well as the guardsmen. Gotta help keep your death tallies, haven't you? Or a scary boy. Okay, so rather than just layering up our shades, you could use contrast, but they're not gloopy in the same way. I find it's just easier to strengthen this. Basically, I'm worried about obscuring some detail. GW have made an incredibly weak black. Not bad, it's just weak. People always moan about it. It's one of my most used paints because it's a soft black. And this is going to allow us to kind of build up and strengthen the color where we want it without just having to repeat a load of the layers of the shades. I probably could have put some black in when I was doing the splatter stuff and it would have gone a really long way. We would have got a more obvious ending to the blood splatters. Anyway, we're now going to go all over, and this is a way to make sure that we can darken our areas down that we want to. Maybe you should have thought about doing this on the tail. Yeah, all the extremities have got it. Tail can get it too. Black looks grim, doesn't it? All right, dry brushing time. I'm gonna have to do something pretty kind of controlled. So we need a medium. Medium plus would be fine for this as well. 1 drop of water from the back of the brush into the middle of the dampening pad. Work it in. Be careful if you're using your palette and you've oversprayed on it. We are not meant to be dry brushing pink here. It wouldn't look bad necessarily, but try not to get any mixed in. Strongish white here, doesn't have to be super strong. And as ever, test twice, paint once. Looking good. Make sure you are 100% dry. And I'll show it on veins first. Hopefully this works nicely. Veins and ribs. Yeah, we're good. There we go. Softly at first. Might need to brace it if it's a wiggly model. He's only got 1 contact point with his base. You can go as subtle or as not as you want, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with just repeating your wash over this. You'll have still done some dry brushing. Your wash is not opaque, so we won't obscure it. Let me quickly show you some of that. Just Caribou currently. So you're still absolutely going to get to benefit from the work that you've done, even if you work over it with a wash. So if it looks too white, don't worry about it. Super forgiving. There you go. That's kind of a really good example of the level that we're going for. Vein's been picked out. Any unsubtleness has kind of been like knocked back, and it took us a very, very brief process. Be careful not to do anything that looks like a brush stroke if you are around your patterns. Or if you want to put it all over, just take some water and fade it out at the top. Easy. With that done, sorry guys, it is now like painting a tank. We just got to block in everything else. Put on a good book or some music or something you want to listen to in the background and just suck it up. Sorry. If you're not sure what color you want to go for your leathers or something like that, just block a bit in. I mean, you can just paint over it if it turns out to not be good. This is Steel Legion. If we were going for like that type of a brown, you can even pop a thin wash on it or something, or just darken it down. See how that looks. And then Rhinox hide, which is actually kind of like it's quite a bloody color, Rhinox hide, so this might blend in a little bit too much. Let's try and mix. Mix is actually pretty good. The horse is really defined. I can always wash this down. I think we'll go for steel legend actually. I want the horse and the wrappings to be really, really distinct from each other, and probably doing this and washing it down is going to be the best bet. Right, I only lightly glued this chest piece on in case I wanted to paint it separately. See if it will come off. Such a cool shaped piece with these little weird details in it. I think this needs to be a bit of a focal point, so I'm going to paint this separately in a blacky bronzy, and hopefully once that's on the piece, we'll look at it in the context of that and be like, okay, cool. Maybe it'll give us some direction or pointers. Just want it to be very obviously metallic-y, so we can dull this down, but it's got some decent coverage. I might even put some Retributor armor in that. Yeah, we can pull it back if we need to, and even wash it with black, or we could use something like a Dryad bark just to wash over it, or Rhinox hide. There's a load of different options. Let's have a play. A little bit of silver. I need a tiny touch, a really tiny touch. And this is basically an all-over buffing. You could do circles, you could do side to side. Just make sure that you spend some time just building it up. And then we'll go to pretty much pure silver. Be a bit more careful with this. We want to catch that insignia and the edges. Then once there's not much on the brush, we'll catch the top sections because they would be getting more light. Now it's time for magic. Shades again. A lot of shades in this video. So what we got? Could use Agrax, but I'm going to use this one initially, and that's just because that should give us some old coppery vibes. Pop it on really fast and loose, make sure you get it absolutely everywhere. And wet your brush, and then anywhere where you got too much, you can kind of highlight by removing it. And it's fine to do several stages of that. How does Horsey look? Yeah, that is doing some work. That might help inform what we do with the rest of it, but that type of colouring is like fast and easy and effective. I still think the black with chipped edges look would be very cool as well. You could absolutely do that if you wanted. The nice thing about having a holder is you can get exactly the right angle. I want this vein to be more obvious, so I'm really very willing to turn to whatever angle is going to be the most helpful, and then I can pretty much, if I get that right, I can edge highlight the vein rather than having to paint along it. Stands out so much there, right? Just reminds us that he's a little bit scary and freaky, which is absolutely the vibe. So a lot of people are afraid of steady hands work. So I want to show you how I'm approaching this. My arm, this isn't just my hand, my arm up to the elbow is braced on the table pretty much. I am turning things to get whatever is the most helpful angle. Pinky first, but everything is braced on the egg. At that point, in small little strokes, it's much easier to get what we're after. Turning it upside down, we'll take the same approach, but I'll brace off the model. Okay, if I was hovering around in the air with my hands not touching each other, I would be so much less steady, like really, really, really obviously. So yeah, the eggs can help, but just be willing to be really, really rigid and firm in it. If you forget to breathe, it's probably an indication that you're doing things about right. All right, so following from the last video where I spoke about how and why I use the colors I use, we got a little bit of the insight into how I came up with the blue that I've used on our rider. So you got a scary looking horsey. I think we've nailed that. We've used Steel Legion a lot in this, more on that in a second. How have I come up with these colors? I mean, firstly, what do you think? What do you think of this kind of pale blue that we've got going on for the coat and the blue-gray for the trousers? What have we done to get this kind of color? Well, looking at the references that Pete sent, which were it's of French World War uniforms, I needed something between these two. So we've ended up with 2/3 Altdorf, which has got this slightly like almost lavendery tint to it. It's a really cool color. And then we've put in the Cantor for something a bit more royal and classic. That ends up semi-pastel-y without being baby blue, which is great. But the Superstar, again, as it was in the horse, and obviously we've got this color everywhere, so it being present is really cool for coherency. We've popped a little bit of the Steel Legion in, and that's ended up with just this fantastic color here. It absolutely looks like cloth or material, and that's really exactly what we're going for. So the kind of weathering dust, whatever you want to call it, which is doing panel lining for us, which is super interesting and really cheaty because we're just outlining all of our shapes on what is quite a small model in a very convenient fashion. Space Marine tech used on clothing, believe it or not. This has been really, really simple. Our pigments on our base of the horse, we had this kind of light pale orangey brown sand or dust going on. It was a mix of these two pigments, and then we've taken, yet again, Superstar Steel Legion, and we just mixed it with Wearbearers, which is a really commonly used reddy brown on the channel. I find a lot of uses for this paint. I love it. It's just been washed over the areas. Highlights for the cloth are very simple. Just add an ivory, or you could even use Steel Legion. 2 red. There we go. So we make the wettest possible mix of this. I mean, really wet. Look at it over that white. Barely doing anything. Thumb check. This looks like dust. It is the color of ready brick dust or something like that. And it is it's just going to do a load of the work for us. So even just base coated, and then with one highlight of the same mix, which is a little bit of this added, we simply go around, and then all the details where we think dust would collect, we kind of coax this towards them. We can, and did, wash the entire thing though, or pull it towards the bottom of his coattails. Just think about where it would be. I've got it onto the metallics. Metallics coming in a second. Just be wary. Points that are contacting each other that wouldn't be permanently in contact, don't put dust there. So it should be, you know, between these two plates that are always next to each other, on top of the boots, but not between the stirrups and the trousers, for example. Google like dusty soldiers, something like that. Use the internet if you're, you know, needing some real life references for this type of stuff. So that's how we came up with the sand color to match the pigments. That's how we came up with the uniform color. What did we do for the metallics? I wanted to put in a lot of age, but I wanted it to be fast and I wanted it to be convenient. So I'm going to show you now exactly how we've approached that. It's another color that we've got elsewhere. We've mixed this and a strong, bright, clean silver, so neutral silver, and a little bit of black. And this has got our base coat, and the base coat is barely metallic. Now, the idea with doing metallics like this is we simply want to put down some slightly scratchy looking, not neat, not tidy metallics, and then we're going to add age to them by putting washes over them. So it's not been on the channel for a while, but Agrex is going to come in clutch for this. And I wanted it to be in a way where I didn't have to be neat or particularly fancy to make stuff work. So see, it's a very dark, only just about metallic color. If I repaint his shoulder pad, you can do more or less brown, more or less black, up to you, whatever you want to go for. And you're looking to make, if you check out his breastplate there, it's only just about metallic. It's really toned down. There's some colors like black metal from Scale 75 that will do this if you want to use a pre-made mix from another company. I'm actually going to put down another layer and just hairdryer it in front of the camera so you can see how little metallic there is in this. The transformation looks kind of cool. See that? This is why mixing colors is a superpower for army painting, because you can make an entire pot of this. Look how much work that is already doing. We just picked a cool color and we used our brains a little bit, just a little bit. So stage 2, time for some dry brushing. Okay, so we're gonna be really careful here. 1 drop of water. we're using the not very often used, but again, absolutely clutch when it is used, extra small here. And I'm going to put the tiniest bit of silver on it. This will be shown to you on my nail. Right, you can see how little is there. What is there is very strong though, and I should, if we get this right, I should be able to highlight the ridges in my fingernail. So we're getting the streaks. We'll go until there's barely anything left. Test on the edge of your nail or something like that. I don't want to be able to streak easily, so I get it to the stage where I can buff, and then check this out. This is what we're going for. So where that little reflective bit is, that's what I want it to be, the brighter section. I'm going to start there, and we're just gently going to buff it up. Take your time. I'd recommend doing your base coats all over, including the cloth parts, then doing this stage, and then give your base, give a second base coat or neatening up around them, because you're going to get little metallic flakes coming off. Look at that. That is insane, the quality of that metallic, right? We'll let the sculpting do the work for us. We're using a tiny, precise dry brush. I don't have to worry too much about it getting in other places, but also it doesn't matter if it gets on the gold. Sequencing, we've planned that. And then we can just gently go around and we're going to buff it up. Because our metallic was super dark beforehand, our base was barely even shiny. This is showing up more obviously. So we're just going to do one stage of metallics basically. You could do a finishing one if you want afterwards, but before the wash, you're just gently buffing up the entirety of the metallics. And I'm going to use the same one pretty much all over because I like how it turned out. Apart from the gold sections, this is fine. So you can see it's on this finish section here. I'll show you how we got to that. So pleased with how these have turned out. It's difficult when you have a small piece as well. Really, really tricky because how do you get in there? What do you do? This is what you do. And then we can just rebase coat these, paint them separately, and we'll be good. Agrax next though. Okay, so this is not going to be your typical application of Agrax. All right, so we're basically going to be using the Agrax. It's not neat because there's water in my brush, and I'm using a teeny tiny brush. But you can see here, we're not going to be glooping it all over. I'm going to remove a load off my brush. We've picked a color that it doesn't matter if it gets on the gold bits. And you could use a bigger brush, but we're painting quite small sections. That's not the reason that I'm using a small brush. The reason that I'm using a small brush is I don't want to flood the piece. Okay, really important thing here. So that nice area that we had highlighted, front of that shoulder, wash your brush or put it in your mouth. And then we're just going to remove the majority of it from that. And hair dry this and I'll show you. After the first step, things go quicker and quicker and quicker and quicker. So now I'm just going to put a little bit at the bottom to make it darker. Or you could dot the rivets. Put it on the visor, put it on the side of his little kiki bit. It's up to you how specific you want to be with this, or how general and how many stages you want to do. But that is how we got the color of the armor. And obviously it's worked out really well there with the decal. You can see it's just got this real rusty, genuine look to it. What about those goldy, bronzy sections? Well, I'm going to whack out the same Agrax. Again, make sure it's not going to flood anything. And because we're using the same colors in lots of sections, you could be doing the silvers at the same time that you were doing this. You might have a thicker mix on one or a mix on the other, but being able to work without worrying about the mess is just, it's fantastic. And while you're there, if you want to repeat some shading or suggest that it's a little bit darker towards the bottom or something like that, you got it on your brush. Enjoy it. You'll be pleased with how these turn out, so have fun with it. All right, so what happens if you want to just up level of the metallics a little? These are the two steps that I would do that are probably the most efficient ones. So if you're still trying to keep this efficient because you're going to paint lots of these, which is how I've approached this. Silver metallics are the same all over, and his gold ones are, the goldy bronze ones are going to be pretty similar as well. I've got an oil now, and number one is just dotting rivets. It's never not a good idea. Although these are teeny tiny rivets, so try not to flood them. It's just making things a little bit more readable by separating them. So you've pushed the darker sections. You could use a little bit of an orange paint on these to make them look more rusty. It depends how old and corroded you want the metal to look. And then the final step would be to repeat our silver, but with great care and great caution. We're going to make sure that we're not too heavy with this. Slightly dampened, tested, the tiniest bit. The nail comes back. All right, and then I'm going to try and do this aiming for edges. We are using the world's smallest dry brush, which is helpful. This is basically edge highlighting at this stage. We can buff up the rounded sections as well to make them look more shiny. And they have this look of being slightly scratched as well. Then when we're confident with the brush, because there's barely any on it, that's when we can be a little bit more heavy. So Still try and think about your angles and which bits to be scratched the most and stuff like that. They're the 2 steps. That's some decals that are probably the most important if you're going to push it. And they're quite easy as well. Beautiful. Give your model a little dust off. You might see that mine's got some metallic sections on him now. You can use the airbrush, but I find it's just always more effective to use another dry brush. This is why you do this before you give the other areas their second base coat. Look at that shoulder pad. Absolutely amazing. Big shout out to this color, which I always pronounce wrong. Reichland Flesh Shade. If you want something a little bit more warm and not as muddy, but definitely something that suggests rust, this is for sure a good option. It's noticeably just that little bit more than what we've used though. So up to you. Think about all the colors you've got in your arsenal. You could use anything to tint metallics from the Citadel shade range. You could use other paints as well, but out of the ones I've used, there's no restrictions with any of the paints that are like this. Just make them thin and put them over. None of them are strong these days. In fact, some of them may be arguably a little bit too weak. That makes them worse for other things, and they just got better and better and better for this. So what if we want some proper warmth in like our goldy bronzy areas? Thin and multiple is better than once and thick. Especially now they're weak, you tend to, if you try to make them stronger, you're better off just doing it twice rather than allowing the paint to be thicker. It only goes one way and that way isn't good, unfortunately. Check out what we've just done to these colors by using this. Plenty of room to carry on knocking them back as well. So yeah, I'm just gonna repeat this and Agrax until I've knocked these back to a color that I'm more comfortable with. So much as the rest of the tutorial, we're using some drab colors to our benefit. Steel Legion and Rhinox Hide have gone in with Mephiston, and that's made sure that when I put a red down on his flag, especially a piece of material literally flapping around, it's one of the most dynamic things on the model. This is either going to be like headline draws attention or not, depending on what I want. Either way is fine, but have a think about it before you do it. So I've gone with a slightly more drab base coat, and then I can just build it up to actual Mephiston on the flag. I'd rather the horse's eyes in particular get attention and this, but if I put something red, like a literal red flag, or directly in the way, it's going to kind of stop you from appreciating the rest of it. So for that reason, I'm going to tone it down a little bit. And then what that means is that really simply, rather than starting Mephiston then going up, I mean, look how red look how red this looks on the palette next to that now. This is a really good way to kind of be in control of what people's eyes do when they look at your model. And I think it's an underappreciated thing. It doesn't take much. Just think, what for me is the coolest bit of the model, or what do I want other people, or maybe including yourself, what do I want the viewer to think is the coolest bit of the model, and just act accordingly. There's still not too much on here that is a non-drab color, so it is going to pull the eyes a little, but this just stops it stealing the thunder from the horse's eyes, which are the real focal point. The guy himself, I've given him a white face mask. It's just a bone color, washed with another shade to stop it from being too clean. That's to make it easier to see him, but his eyes are so small and they're hidden by the rim of his hat, and the model is actually kind of looking downwards. So the horse's eyes are going to be the focus for me. And for that reason, this is why we've kind of tried to promote the red that's here a little bit less than the red that's on the eyes. Other details that I've left separately, backpack and the kind of gun holster thing. I didn't want to choose another thing to pull attention that was at the front of the model that much, so I've chosen the empty one. These are just going to get a little bit of aging, courtesy of small Series D. You could use a extra small plus if you want a tiny bit more control. By control, I mean the size of the brush. What we're going to do is we're just going to carefully age these up. It's just a matter of patience and building up to the point where you have to put a bit of paint on the model first over a flat base coat for it to start taking paint more easily, but also you just need to get more comfortable with how the brush is behaving. When you do, you can up the pressure. So I'm just going to repeat that a couple of times. What it should do is bring up all the edges, but not in like a super edge highlighty fashion. And that should make the stuff look a little bit more aged, especially this holster. I want it to look old, you know, like dusty old. Not dry brushing, but dry cracked leather, and we can pop a wash over it afterwards. Because I took the paint from the top of my lid there. Just to note, this is dehydrated paint, so that's come out a little bit drier than I'd expect. Normally I do it just for ease of use, or because I'm lazy, whichever way you want to put it, but There, I think it held me back a little bit. Steel Legion's actually a slightly more grainy paint than a lot of GWs. That's one of the reasons it base coats so efficiently. There we go. This is what we're trying to add. Details like that. Insignia that's embossed in. Because we're going in circles, we'll highlight all the edges. Make sure you get it from all angles. The nice thing about this is you just repeat the same color. You could go up to an ivory if you wanted now, but I think that's pretty much okay. If you go too far, so let me pull a really light color into the mix. This is Rakarth. I'll use this with great caution. Inside the same brush, so I've still got the previous color going on there. Go super gently at first. And this will just hugely exaggerate the readability of things. It lets you know where the edges are, but it doesn't edge highlight them in like a punchy way. It's much more natural, so for stuff like leather, it's unbelievable. In circles, you can go from the top if you want to suggest lighting, but if you want to just suggest it is old and it's battered, circles will hit it from every angle. Quick wash with a shade. Say a wash, this is basically a glaze at this point. It'll pull in here a little bit and we can pull it in there on purpose. But essentially we're just looking to tint everything. This is really good. We've got a very popular leather video. It's an old one, but a good one. This is a technique I use a lot to make stuff look like leather. You give it a load of aging and scratching, and then you just pull it all together and deepen it ever so slightly with a shade at the end. Incredible. For now, it's simply a matter of taking all of our elements and putting them together. Make sure that I've not missed any angles due to painting them separately. Perfect. They're such cool models. This is one of the best sets we've ever had the pleasure of being sent by GW. Thank you very much, guys. Hopefully they can meet demand for it, because I think this is going to be one of the most kind of jumped on boxes they've done for a long, long time. I think it's going to sell more copies than there are Guard players out there. To wrap up what I think is important over this model, because people are more interested in the color stuff than I think we originally thought when we started the channel. Not exactly the colors we used, but why we made the decisions we did. I'll quickly cover what I think are the bits that are making a really big difference. Number one, we have a striking technique on the horse. That's cool, it's punchy, that'll stand out on any basing. We picked out the veins afterwards, which just makes it look a little bit more angry and probably disgusting, but that's kind of what we were going for, really. Whether this looks arty or like animal markings, it doesn't particularly matter. The metallic's been done well, and we always try and do our metallics well because I think they're such an incredible thing, especially on army models. But we've done them largely in the same methods with a couple of variations. We've used different washes over the same base, basically. We've either got dark silver going on or the goldy bronzy, and then we've just affected it with washes with some paint mixed in thereafter, and that's made a really big difference. They're high quality and they will carry stuff on an army level, and us choosing to do them similarly means that we can put more time into getting one method better, and then we just layer these filters over it afterwards. We've got the focal point of the eye. The guy's eyes were too small, so we gave him a striking white mask, so at least you know where his head is, because it's kind of hidden in there. And yeah, the focal point for me is definitely it's the eyes of the horse, and then maybe we could have some glowing stuff here that was red. That would look pretty cool as well. Hopefully you found that useful. If you've got any more questions about the scheme or coming up with a scheme, or you've got some suggestions on how we could approach that in a video, let us know. The only last thing to touch on is the basing and the weathering. The rider looks like he's been through dust and mud and is about to die, and that's really appropriate for the kind of race that we're painting here. They die in their dozens, so we really wanted to make it, like war-torn and like he could be in a horrible situation. Hopefully we've achieved that. Hope you found this useful. Do sign up to our newsletter if you're interested in eggs. It's going to be released imminently. And any questions, pop them below. Give us your suggestion for the best follow-up video to this. It could be for a complete model or a particular technique you'd like, and we'll get you sorted in the near future. As ever, the best suggestion will win a paint set if you're choosing, and we'll throw in one of our model holders as well.